Our guest is Maria Underwood. Fundraise founder Maria Underwood has more than a decade of experience in fundraising, business, and social media strategy, including in major markets across the US. She has consulted and presented internationally on digital fundraising, millennial giving, and trends in the nonprofit sector. Having been successful in all types of fundraising campaigns, from major events and corporate sponsorships to peer-to-peer fundraising, grassroots, and grant writing, Maria has unique knowledge of the how and why behind donor giving. Additionally, she has served as a host and moderator for various panels, including with national speakers, with a primary focus on the rise in political activism since 2016. Maria Underwood, welcome to Next Steps Forward.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Now, we're excited to have you. Thank you so much for your time. So, Maria, when we start here, your folks were a big influence on you, and obviously because your dad was the president of a nonprofit. And I understand that your mom would be the first to volunteer to lead fundraising efforts for various causes. Mm-hmm. What advice did they give you as you grew up? And did they encourage you to become a fundraiser?
So they didn't encourage me to become a fundraiser, but it was something that was just kind of in the natural fabric of what we did. Like you mentioned, my father was the president of a large nonprofit here in Birmingham. So we were often in and out of those facilities, watched a life of service that he led. And my mom was also in charge of fundraisers in town. So it wasn't expected that that was my profession, but it was expected that that's kind of how a lifestyle that I led. And I think the biggest lesson in fundraising I learned came from like, just always ask. I think my mom would always say, like, the worst someone can say is no. So you might as well ask them. And she was really successful in that endeavor. And I think that translates to a lot of what we do. Like if you just ask or reach out, you're going to get a lot more positive feedback than you expect. So watching them lead lives that way and kind of getting that support helped to lead me into my fundraising journey.
You know, I've been involved in some fundraising initiatives as well. And like you said, it's just ask, but it's hard to ask people for money.
It is.
Everyone's got different situations, different scenarios. You don't know their circumstances. Maybe they look, affluent on the outside, but maybe they're not working. They got laid off something. Mm-hmm. How do you do it? Is it a certain characteristic trait?
You get really used to hearing no and you learn to not take it personally, but that does take time. And I think one thing that I try to lean into is, if you don't ask, the answer is no. And you don't want to say no for your donor. When I have raised money for like larger amounts, it can be really hard to go to someone and say, can you give us $1 million or can you give us however much money? I think the worst thing someone has done when I've over asked, they've laughed and said, like, I really appreciate that you think I can give you that much and I can't, and they give less. So it's kind of a backhanded compliment, I guess. But wanting to get someone involved and helping them figure out how, like, I know you care about this cause and here are ways in which you can really make an impact on that. And if it's a number thing, at the end of the day, a number is a number and you can talk around it, you can go above or below. But it is not an easy profession in a lot of ways. It is a lot of customer service. It's a lot of marketing. At the end of the day, you're kind of helping people figure out how they want to make their impact. And that is relationship building. And that is really a special thing to be able to do.
Now, you just mentioned that your mother said, what's the worst that they can say is no. I had a guest on a few months ago and they would say, what's the worst that can happen? And they said, let's turn that phrase around and let's say, what's the best that can happen? Mm-hmm. And I loved it so much. I actually have a Post-it note on my computer monitor from that guest. And so it's just sort of like you sit here and you're like, it's a lousy, crappy day. Oh, wait a minute. What's the best that can happen today? So right. Love the mindset. So Maria, there's no two ways about it. Fundraise is a tech company, and no offense, you were not. At least you were not a tech person when you started the company.
Yes.
What inspired you to start a fundraising company based on technology?
That's a great question because the intent wasn't necessarily to start a tech company, but I wanted a solution to a problem that I had. And the way to build that was to build a tech solution to it. I would watch the news and feel frustrated and not know how to kind of support or take action on things that I saw that I cared about. And my way of doing that at the time was donating to nonprofits, because that's how I grew up. And I was a nonprofit person. I was a fundraiser. So I saw nonprofits being that kind of change that would help me support the world. but it takes time to figure out where the good nonprofits are, which ones are in good standings, what's not, something that came up overnight and maybe isn't proven yet, or even like where to find local ones if they're local stories. And I thought there had to be a solution out there to help me in real time figure out like this news story, here's a nonprofit, and there wasn't one. So started the journey of how do you do that? And unfortunately for me, the answer was tech.
And we'll get into your vetting process later because I'm
Yeah.
fascinated by the concept. And to your point, is it locals and international, international? But some business founders have argued that you can't get started with a complete business plan. And others say business plan is worthless because it's little more than a bunch of wishful verbiage and unproven projections. Where did you fall on that spectrum, plan or no plan, and where did you go from there?
So I would say I was a little more on the no plan side. That's been my personality and maybe one of my toxic traits. But I also had a hard time with that in the tech space because you do see a lot of like high valuations. You see people with really aggressive metrics. And for something that's unproven, it was really hard for me to wrap my head around. I can't go out and say I'm going to have 100,000 users this year because I don't know what I'm going to have next month. And I could project it, of course, but for me, that kind of gray area was always tough. And I think I was in a moment of like, I know the solution will help people and it will help me. So let's get it built. Let's try a beta version of it. Let's do something like really accessible, not all the bells and whistles, and try it out. And then let's go from there. And as that was being built, worked on the business and marketing plan behind it. It's a B2C platform, which also just takes more time, more resources. So hindsight could have done more on the business plan on the front end, but I also think it would have taken me longer to get it built. And this is a tool that I was kind of ready for people to have in their hands.
And maybe as a follow-up, I guess, are there other, I'll say peers or like platforms that you could actually look at their metrics, look at their growth rate to compare or at least use as a benchmark?
So there aren't any other platforms like Fundrage currently. We started out as a Chrome extension. We're an app now. There are other ways to give. So if people want to give to things they care about, you can now use your social media, Instagram and Facebook have the add to fundraiser causes. There are GoFundMe's, but there was nothing that connected you directly to the news story and connected you to a vetted 501c3 nonprofit that wasn't kind of a crowdfunding platform. So I really was shooting kind of blind when looking even more so at a business plan and at metrics.
So if there's nothing else like Fundrage, where can they find you in Fundrage?
Fundrage.com. They can download us on in Google or in the web in the App Store on Apple. Like I said, we were a Chrome extension to start. We're now just an app. We're also on Instagram at Fundrage.
So now that you're a self-admitted non-tech person when you started this, and it's out there for the whole world to see,
Mm-hmm.
what strategies did you employ to educate yourself about technology and how it would work for what you wanted to do as you came from a non-tech background?
So I've learned a lot over the course of this journey. I did when I first had the idea of it, I went to a lot of people I knew in my network who were in tech, who were tech adjacent, and said, like, I'm thinking of this. How do I build it? What do I do? And that those conversations led to the Chrome extension conversation of that's the easiest way to put a notification on someone's desktop of how they can find a nonprofit. So then once we nailed that down, it was kind of figuring out who can build a Chrome extension, how do we do that, and where do I find those people? So there are really great platforms like Upwork that you can hire consultants in the technology space. That worked for me for a little bit, but as a non-technical founder, it was really important for me to be able to sit with someone. What I learned on the hiring a consultant was I had to be able to speak the language of the developer to be able to get the outcome that I really wanted for what I built, because I could say I want something and I needed a developer to look back at me and say, like, you actually don't want that, or you don't mean that, or that won't work, this will. And consultants can be great. They build what you want, but as a non-technical founder, I needed someone who could have a conversation with me a little bit more and help me figure it out. So I was really grateful to find someone who was local in Birmingham, where I live, who could help me kind of talk through that side of it.
And when did you come up with the idea of Fundrage And how long did it take to get Fundrage up and going?
So I first started ideating about Fundrage in 2016-ish. There's just a lot going on in the world, socially, politically. It seemed like every day I turned the news on, something else was making me really frustrated, or angry or sad or whatever. And I couldn't find enough ways to get involved, particularly on a local level. I think when people don't know what to do, they either can turn the news off, they become apathetic, or they give to one of the national causes that just they know about. But I was like, I want to make sure I'm helping like local nonprofits in these. Like if this is an issue that's in Alabama, I want to support a nonprofit here, not just a national one. So started to try to figure out how to put all that together into an idea. And quite frankly, I sat on the idea for a long time, longer than I should have. Because I just wasn't sure how to do it and I didn't know if I could, and had full-time jobs and didn't have time. So I moved back to Birmingham in early 2020 and actually joined a cohort of called Voltage Accelerator Program at the Innovation Depot, which is our big startup innovation hub. And it was for ideas. And it was just, if you have an idea that you think might work, join this and let's test it out. So I went through that program, and that's when I really got to start putting the meat on the bones and building what Funreach became.
I give you a lot of credit because you're not just using your words, you're using your actions. You turn the news on and there's something you don't like. And my wife has always said, like, you can't complain about it unless you vote, whatever
I
that
love
issue
that.
is.
I need to be friends with your wife.
So she's on social media. I'll give her handles. But it's that simple thing of like, don't just complain about it, do something about it.
Right.
And so I love that. And I think I know the answer to this question, but what challenges did you encounter in the early stages of building Fundrage, given your non-tech background, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so everything technical was hard. And I think even harder for me of just like building a startup company. It's all the legal, it's the marketing, it's the accounting, it's all the things that, you have to be as an owner and a founder. And then learning an entirely new language of tech stacks and Python and AI. Like there was nothing that felt easy, and I think that's the hardest part of it. It's hard to enjoy wins when you're just constantly feeling like you're catching up over and over again. So that was a big challenge to me on the technical side. And then I think we got a lot of really big excitement from people. Loved this idea. Like I've been looking for the solution. I think another challenge I've experienced and still do is that people love the idea, but when you actually give them a way to take action, they don't always take it. And so social impact platforms tend to have a little bit harder time with that, with adoption, because people have to change their habit and their mindset to use it. And so that's been a challenge as well, getting the excitement, but not seeing that translate on users.
So you just talked about how you got yourself up to speed in the tech space. How did you go about assembling a team with the necessary technical expertise to support the development of your tech company?
I asked everyone I knew. The good thing about being a fundraiser is that I have a fairly good network of people who will take my call if they think I'm not asking them for money. And I just asked over and over and would get, I can't build that, but I think someone can. Chrome extensions, I've learned, are a niche in technical build, so it was harder to find someone to start down that path. And he was great. And then with our app, I actually started working with a venture studio who's in Atlanta, called Renew Ventures, and they have a developer that specifically works on social impact apps, Dassault and Company, and he helps founders who are non-technical build solutions that are looking to make change. And so working with Mark Dassault and his team, and then my team at Renew VC, it was a lot easier kind of later on when we were building the app. I learned a lot, so I knew better questions to ask by this process anyways. But finding people who want to build for impact and not just for a quick, quick scalable B2B SaaS, moneymaker, it's a big difference. I think for us too, we're dealing with donations, we're dealing with politics. It's a lot of, you have to build trust in a lot of ways in what you're building. So finding the people who wanted to build with integrity was really important to me too.
Fundraise was born of the phrase anger in action. Does someone have to be angry or even in a rage to use Fundraise?
They don't. We did throw a fundraiser as our launch party to try to make it seem more fun and positive. I think when I was creating Funrage, it was coming from a place of more frustration, honestly, than rage. But we want people to give back whenever they want to, and however they're feeling. So if you see something or feel positive about something, give back to a cause. But I think where people don't think about giving as often, or didn't maybe pre COVID, was giving to support something they really care about. And sometimes that care can feel angry, but it's really just like passion. It's like I really care about making sure that this sustains or that this is supported. So you don't have to feel rage to give, but it makes for a good name.
Fundraiser, I love that. You mentioned a few of these earlier, but how is Fundraise different from other fundraising platforms such as GoFundMe, Donately, Fundraise Up, ActBlue, and WinRed?
Yeah, so with the Axe Blue and Win Red in particular, those focus on political donations. And we focus strictly right now on nonprofits. Fundraise will only recommend nonprofits on our platform that are rated 3 stars and above on Charity Navigator. Charity Navigator is kind of the gold standard of nonprofit seal of approval. We want to make sure that when people are giving in that moment and an emotion, they're making a good decision. Um, GoFundMe also does great work. But people can get on the platform and raise money, crowdfunding and kind of any cause. And we wanted to make sure in building this that the money is going to a nonprofit specifically that has board oversight, that has money being spent in the correct way, so that because you are reacting in kind of a quicker moment when you use Fundraise, you don't have to second guess like, wait, where did that money go? Did it really go to the right place? So helping people just trust the system a little bit more. Um, and none of those connect you directly with the news. So with the app, if you're reading the news on your phone, if you're reading an article, you hit the share button just like you would like send a message to your friend, or like share that article. You share it into the Fundraise app, and we immediately recommend nonprofits that are connected to that direct article. And so that quick connection is our differentiator.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So you're sharing something of relevance in terms of supporting a cause as opposed to, look what I ate for dinner last night. Nobody really cares that you had snails or steak or whatever you had.
Right.
And just I want to touch on Charity Navigator a bit, just because I've had a lot of experience with them. Just for our viewers and listeners, unlike most, if not all, other charity rating agencies, which do it year over year, Charity Navigator has a rolling 3-year window, so it smooths out any noise with an organization, whether a lot of money coming in or a lot of money going out. So you get a much better sense in their financials. And so I just want to differentiate them. As a nonprofit, they're a little tricky to work with, but they are, to your point, the gold standard that's out there. So I appreciate you raising that. So you talk about the different fundraisers, the different charities you work with, and you talk about how there's a story, you press a button, it goes right to that. How does Fundraise work? Is it like a clearinghouse for nonprofits?
So we actually use the API of Charity Navigator. It's built into the app. So we are pulling Charity Navigator data in real time into the Fundraise app. And then we use AI to connect, basically to read the article that you're reading and to pull out keywords and connect that to the nonprofit. So we have the nonprofit sorted by category and by mission statement, that they have given to Charity Navigators. We're using all that data. And if you're reading an article about wildfires in California, we're going to connect you with nonprofits in California to start. That's where we're going to start the list. And it's going to talk about climate change nonprofits, environmental nonprofits, because we're going to connect you to that article that you're reading. You can also choose a local. So when you're looking at the nonprofits that we give you, you can choose a state. So if you're reading about climate change and I see it, but I want to really focus on what that means for Alabama, where I live, I can type in Alabama at the top, and we'll give you local nonprofits to you. And that's part of helping when people want to give locally and make a local impact. We want to make sure they can do it, and they're not just being fed kind of the biggest nonprofits that everyone hears about the most.
So you talked earlier about how you're not involved currently in politics for fundraising. Are there any types of charities from a classification that you don't get involved with, whether it be religious or education or anything like that? Or is it really just anything in Charity Navigator through the API, we'll scrub it and pull it in?
So the good thing about Charity Navigator as well is that they are really good at looking at how nonprofits spend their money. And we're a nonpartisan platform. So anything that has been rated as a nonprofit 3 stars and above on Charity Navigator, we will pull through. But that also means that those nonprofits are not giving money to political donations, they're not advocacy groups, they're not lobbying groups. So, it's a conversation we consistently have on who should we pull through the platform? Should you be able to kind of buy your way in and have your nonprofit show up more? But I really don't want to do that. I want to keep the integrity of the match, and people find new causes to support that way. They find new ways to get involved. So that's been where we've started and why we chose to use just Charity Navigator nonprofits. But it is a continuing conversation. So not everyone is on that platform, which we also understand.
Keep the integrity. What a novel idea in technology.
We're
Who
trying.
would have thought that in today's world?
Hmm.
So I know you've used the example in the past of someone being outside in a heat wave and complaining to friends about the weather. Fundrage allows a user to turn their frustration into something positive by donating to a national or international nonprofit addressing climate change. Is there a way for them to do something closer to home, such as donating to a local cooling center, or is it something is that too granular to be in Fundrage?
Yeah, so as long as they are listed as a Charity Navigator nonprofit, you can donate locally. So just like you can share the article that you're reading into the app, you can also just open the app on its own. So you just hit Fundrage on the app, and it will immediately come up and say, "How are you feeling today? And what do you want to give to?" So you can choose any cause. So to your point, if you're hot and you're annoyed by it, you're like, "Man, climate change." You can pull up your Fundrage app, hit the climate change button, and we'll be able to suggest nonprofits that target that. And then you can hit Alabama or whatever state you're in, and we'll narrow it down for you that way. So trying to make it as easy as possible to do something about what you care about.
I appreciate that for me to keep it simple. In some sense, do you feel like Fundrage faces a threefold challenge? First, it has to connect with someone who's upset or excited about an issue or cause. Second, you have to persuade them that they can do something with that energy. And third, they have to use Fundrage to do it. How do you bridge those three challenges?
That is a big challenge. That was part of our change from the Chrome extension to the app. Because when we talk to people about Fundrage, they are passionate about being able to do something. But then going back to their computer and downloading a Chrome extension, we kind of lost people in the shuffle of that. So the app puts it in their hands better. It helps us connect with people quicker as well. Everyone's comfortable with downloading apps these days. So it was one less conversation to have, one less roadblock that we felt. But it is hard to change habits. And the easy thing that people do when they see the news, and this is what we've heard from many customer interviews we've done, is I just turn it off. I stop listening. And to remind them that they actually had the power to, even with $5, to donate to a cause that will use that money well to take action. It is hard. And I don't have a full big marketing team behind me, massive dollars to kind of say in people's faces. So it is smaller ways to remind them. And we're working on better ways and bigger ways to do that going forward. Yeah, habit change is hard, especially when it's something that is not a good feeling. People want to get it away as fast as possible. And that's our goal. But the other way that they're choosing to do that now is just ignoring it.
So when I download the app, do I create an account and store my credit card in there?
Yes, you do. And that helps us also at the end of the year show you how much impact you've made. So you can actually go into it at any point and say, see, 40% of my donations this year were to environmental causes, 20% were to childhood education. And so you can keep track of the impact you've made, which is really fun. My dream is to be able to do like a Spotify Wrapped that you see on everybody's Instagram every year, but do it for their social impact of the year. So we're working on ways to get to that too.
And how has Fundrage been received by the nonprofits you connect users with?
So basically we're giving them money. They don't have to opt in. There's no pay to play for nonprofits. As a nonprofit person, that's been really important to me. So they've been happy just to get extra donor dollars without spending any of their development funds, their marketing dollars. They just get free money from us. So it really hasn't been any pushback.
Free money, we'll take that.
Yeah.
So, is the appeal of Fundraise to donate to a cause that suddenly arises that isn't necessarily connected to a specific organization? Or does the value lie in introducing first time donors or novice donors to groups that share their passion?
So that's a really good question. I think a lot of people, and especially as you look more into Gen Z, people are giving more to causes than they are to nonprofits. Like people don't really care about the nonprofit as much anymore as they want to help X cause. So we help them do that, but as a result, they find new nonprofits new to them that are working on issues that they care about. Nonprofits are crucial. They're always going to be around as long as there are services that they need to provide, and we need to support them to sustain what they're doing. But not everyone's going to be your annual donor year after year. They might go to your fundraiser and not come back. So this helps people stay engaged with the cause. More so necessarily than the actual nonprofit. I think it's just a shift in culture and how people give. That's what we're seeing.
Do you have any metrics that show what the average donation dollar size is? I'm always fascinated by these numbers.
On our platform, it's about $7. People give between 5 and 10 because it's that quick donation. It's not going to be a huge thoughtful gift. We've gotten some 20s before, but we're in the 5 to 10 range, and that's what we are designed to be.
And do you have default buttons on there? Donate 5, donate 10, other?
We do, and then we have other. So you can, if you're really mad, you can really pull out the big wallet. But we do 5, 10, and 20 as our defaults.
So you've made it crisp proof, so I can just get it out and touch it, and off it goes.
Yep, absolutely.
Love it.
Make it as easy as possible to give back.
Perfect. And I assume the cost of creating Fundraise required outside money at some point. When did you decide that you had to go beyond bootstrapping to raising investment capital?
So building tech is not cheap, and I had to do a technical build before I could start to kind of prove concept. So I had a friends and family round, so I do have some angel investors in that space, and then with some accelerator programs that I was in, I got some capital through that. So I haven't had to do an actual big raise yet, which has been really nice, but we'll be looking at doing that probably in the next 6 months.
I know you're a fundraiser by trade, but doing a friends and family round, that's always hard.
It's harder to ask for yourself than it is for something else. And it's harder to like put yourself out there as a brand or a startup founder than it is to have an organization behind you. There's a lot more risk to it, and it's a lot scarier, to be honest.
So Maria, I sometimes like to divide issues and data into generations to create a baseline, but also to get a sense of where things are heading. As you analyze donors and the causes they support, what similarities and differences do you see with baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Y?
Yeah, so right before the break, we were talking about this a little bit, but in Gen Z, we're seeing a lot more, and even younger millennials, we're seeing people give to causes more than to nonprofits. They want to make a change, and it's less about kind of the institution of where they're giving that money to. And it's harder to capture them for a monthly donor. They'll come to events. You're always going to have the friends are going to give wherever their friends are asking them to give. But those big checks aren't coming from young millennials and Gen Z as much as they're looking at like where they're spending their money. They're going to make sure they shop at Patagonia over a company that doesn't give back to social impact. So it's more of a lifestyle in this generation, and brands are moving in that direction. You see every day a new brand that's talking about their social impact. You see the rise of B Corps instead of C Corps, benefit corporations that promise to make social impact. And I think that's hard on nonprofits in some way. You're always going to get those major donors who are in the boomer generation, but nonprofits are going to have to kind of adjust a little bit on how they fundraise because how people are giving is changing.
In terms of the younger generation, are there specific specific issues you're seeing them focus on, like climate change, or if something happens in Haiti or something like that?
Climate change is a big one. And I think because it is something that has been ignored or not yelled about for long enough. And we're seeing impacts of it already. And it's like, I have a 6-month-old, it's going to affect him. And So we're seeing a lot of that, and social change, social impact is also something that we're seeing a lot. And on our platform, we see a good amount of activity when there's something involving like either like restricting or talking about the rights of someone. We see a lot more activity around that. I think um, there's a lot going on in the space and Supreme Court rulings right now, and you just people. I think those kind of things people don't know how they can get involved, and so they turn to an app like Fundrage as a way to help kind of scream into the void, I guess.
Have you been able to incorporate feedback from users to improve Fundrage? And is that feedback different by age group, or in terms of the relationship with Fundrage, are the generations pretty much the same?
It's been interesting because I thought that we were building for Gen Z when we started building this app, and a lot of our users are actually on kind of the um, older millennial side. Even like my parents and their age love using it. It is easy, and that's part of why we built it this way. Moving to the app away from the Chrome extension was user feedback. They wanted something at their fingertips that wasn't, tied to their desktop. Um, we're also constantly adding in more features. This app that is out now that you can download for free is a version one. So there are lots of bells and whistles we'll put on eventually, and we're right now doing customer conversations and focus groups on how we can continue to improve it. But ultimately, we want to make it easy to give, directly connect you or find you in that moment of frustration, and that where your money is going is to a valid, vetted nonprofit.
And just as you had to reach out to seasoned tech people to get the company up and going, how crucial is venture capital to a startup like Fundrage? And how do you go about raising outside money?
So it's really tough as a social impact B2C company. It's like the worst thing to do if you want to raise venture capital because we're not going to make $1 million next week, and we don't have a business plan to. So um, the VC firm that we are working with now, Renew Ventures, is actually, in my mind, a unicorn VC firm because they focus on social impact founders. They focus on people who are trying to make a change and come in and help them. So the partnership with them for me started last year, which was 3 years into building the company. And I've talked to a lot of VCs, one called Fundrage a passion project and not a real business. It's just, you have to find the right people who will go on the journey with you when you're working on building something to help create change and not just to make money. And that is not what anyone in the tech space, traditional VC tech space wants to hear at the moment.
Are there VC firms that focus on, I'll say, specific issues, or is it just more about, like you said, tech making money?
There are a lot of really good VC firms out there that focus on specific tech verticals. So if it's health tech, if it's med tech, climate tech, there are a lot of accelerators that focus that way as well. So it's out there. It just for Fundrage in particular, and for like what we're doing with nonprofits in the news, and it's so niche in the VC space that it's just been harder to kind of mine through all the opportunity and find the right partners.
And which Fundrage qualities or aspects resonate most with your venture capitalists?
So the social impact part of it does resonate. I think there are a lot of VCs that do care about finding founders and solutions that do make sense for the world. So that part is what gets us kind of in the door. It's the revenue stream and all that you've got to talk through, like to find your deal and get down the road.
You mentioned before that you live and work in Birmingham, Alabama, which is a great place, even with the tornadoes coming through tonight.
Yep.
But I have to ask, what are the pros and cons of launching a tech company in Birmingham as opposed to Silicon Valley, which obviously is considered the center of the universe in tech development?
Yeah, I think that other cities outside of Silicon Valley, outside of Austin, Texas, are really on the rise right now for tech hubs. Birmingham has a tech enthusiastic community, is what I like to say. And there are a lot of founders here who are all trying to build. So you get that community, that camaraderie of founder support. But you're also much closer to decision makers in a city like Birmingham. you're not 5 degrees of separation from the person you need to talk to. You're maybe one or two. So being able to access resources, community, the founder space can be lonely. And like we were talking about earlier, like you kind of feel like you're catching up every single day. You're always behind, and talking to other people who feel the same way or have felt that way is sometimes like all you really need. So there are founders moving into the city. There is a good community of support. And you get a little bit more, you get more support. You're not one in a million founders. You're one in, less than that. So you get more support and focus for sure.
So the founders have their own support group, but do you find yourself in competition with them? I know Fundraise might be different because there's nothing else like it, but other founders that are there, not everyone's got the original idea.
Yeah, I mean, there's always, in a city like Birmingham, you're going to compete for resources for sure. The good thing about tech, and especially the tech industry in a post-COVID world, is you travel, money travels. So I know people who are raising outside, who live here, who are raising outside of the city, people who move into Birmingham for certain customers, but have customers somewhere else. So the boundaries of the resources you need are so wide now that it doesn't feel like you have to kind of protect who you know. Um, for things like funding, there are so many groups that are so specific now that you're going to find your niche and kind of lean into it. We have a woman founders group that some of us have breakfast once a week and just kind of talk about struggles. And honestly, it's more helpful than competitive, which is really nice.
Well, it's got to be nice to know that you're not going through it alone. Everyone else is facing the same ups and downs and struggles and
Yeah,
challenges and questioning. And no, that's great.
absolutely.
So have you had to attract or retain talent to Birmingham, or in today's work from anywhere world, is that even necessary?
Yeah, I mean, I think that people working together locally is really important. I think that there was an excitement around remote work, when COVID hit. And there still are benefits to that. You can find great talent no matter where they are and work with them. So I do think that there are some benefits, but I really like working with someone face to face. I like being, um, in the same room with someone, asking questions, reading body language and all that. And that's probably part of my background as a fundraiser of like having to have those conversations and relations with people and wanting them to feel comfortable in the room. So I have worked with people on the fundraise team who are local to Birmingham. I have worked with people who are consultants, and you kind of do what you have to do these days, but I do try to keep people close.
How do you leverage Birmingham's unique strengths and attributes to differentiate your technology company in the market?
I think that Birmingham is really, really underestimated as a city, and it's where I'm from. I lived in DC for 10 years, but I'm from Birmingham. I live here again now. And it is really nice to work in a city that's in a state that people, um, I think have, whatever their worldviews are of it, it's nice to be able to say like there are founders here who are working to do really good things, and being a part of that in Birmingham has been important to me. Um, I want to help create kind of a city that I am proud to be from. And so that's why it's important for me to stay here and build my business here.
I want to congratulate you for escaping the swamp.
Thank you. I was
Not not
I was there for long enough to have almost been a lifer, but I came back.
uh, not many people can do that. So congratulations. So now is my favorite part of the show, and usually my guest's least favorite part of the show. We've talked a lot about Fundraise, and let's get back to you. Who are role models that have inspired you or do inspire you beyond your parents?
A lot, honestly, and this is going to sound like a cop out answer probably, but there are a lot of people doing like the head down work every day to make change. There are nonprofit professionals. There are particularly female founders who are juggling a lot at home and business, who are um, staying in the work to make sure that things can happen and are better for the generations behind us. And anytime I come across women who are kind of doing something to make change or to kind of look behind them and help pull someone up when they've made it, those are the people that I've always gravitated towards and want to try to keep top of mind as I'm looking at the type of person I want to be.
So you just mentioned the phrase female founder.
Mhm.
I told you before the show I had to practice this a lot. You are what has been dubbed a momtrepreneur. It's tough enough being one or the other, mom or entrepreneur, let alone both.
Mhm.
Here's the $1 million question. Can women have it all?
They cannot. Women cannot have it all. No one can, but particularly women. I don't think that means that you can't have everything at once. You're just not going to have everything is not going to be good at once. There are going to be times where your job is priority. There are going to be times when the baby is sick and he's priority, or not sleeping through the night, and you've got to prioritize a little bit of sleep in the day because you didn't get it at night. Having it all is such a it's so unfair to say, because can I have a company and a family? Yes. Can I have them all well equally? No. Um, and I think that's a really hard kind of pill to swallow. But it's the truth.
But I think maybe as a follow up to that, to your point, nobody can have it all, whether it's
Right.
a mom CEO or a dad CEO. You're going to make sacrifices.
Right.
And so it's, I mean, that directed as a negative female comment, which is something we talked about, previously.
Right.
But we all want to have it all, and you can't. There are ebbs and flows.
Right. And I think a lot of the female entrepreneur kind of momtrepreneur thing comes in where women are often, whether or not anyone means for it to, the kind of emotional burden of parenting falls on the mom, right? Like we're the ones who will get the call from school first, or have to remember these things. Like it's the constant kind of being, even if you don't have to pack the lunch, it's saying like, here's what should go in the lunch. That kind of emotional burden. And I'm grateful in that I have a partner who does share emotional burden as much as just like the tasks. So I have been very lucky in that way. But there are times, he couldn't step in for me for trying to do a feeding while I'm on a Zoom call that's scheduled. So there, it's a different type of, how you have to use your brain. And that has been kind of the biggest journey for me.
And it's amazing how COVID has changed that family dynamic.
Yeah.
For 20 years, I spent 3.5 hours a day commuting from Connecticut to New York City. And then all of a sudden, my office is gone. They got rid of it for corporate real estate shrinking. It's like, okay, well, that's 3.5 hours a day I got back. So
Yeah.
love to hear the partnership. I mean, those are just great stories you want to hear, and it just makes the family stronger and the business more successful. And maybe as a follow-up to that, how do you prioritize your time and energy between your family and Fundrage?
So I don't always do it well. But I think I try to look at my calendar each week, and my husband does the same, and say like, who has the busier day? Who has, or if not the busier day, the bigger meetings that require more thought and care and attention. Um, and if it's me, then he's on duty for the baby cries at night. Like he gets up in the middle of the night so that I can sleep. And vice versa for him. So we try to find the partnership in that. And then I think if there are weeks where I know that I've got a lot going on that are going to keep me, home later, or having to, not see the family as much during the week, then the next week I prioritize better. And say like, this week it's got to be family because last week it couldn't be because of these things going on. So part of it is, your life is run by your calendar, and by what deadlines you have to hit and what's coming up. And then part of it is, okay, I had to do that last week, and so next week we're going to focus on family time, or we're going to have family date night if we need to, or and make sure that we come back together, because you can't find balance every day. Some weeks you can't find balance, but you can even it out, if you're communicative about it over time.
Well, I
That's
love
how
your
it works
point.
for us anyways.
No, I love the point about, kind of doing a weekly reset in terms of, okay, what worked, what didn't work, who had the busier week, who can step up and give the other one a break this
Mhm.
week. And so love hearing that. The show is about resiliency, empowerment, and those are two big things. Personal, family life is top issue here.
Yeah.
And maybe another follow-up there is, what role do resilience and self-care play in your work-family balance, and how do you make time for it?
So self-care is and particularly hard, I think, in the fundraise capacity because what I'm doing is helping people react to the news, which means I'm in the news all the time. And as anyone knows who watches, it's hard to see things like constantly upsetting or frustrating, or constantly hear about wars and so being able to I have to pull back from that sometimes too and say, like, I can't just sit in all the bad things going on in the world. I've got to be able to find the positive side of it. So that's a challenge that I struggle with quite frequently. And it's doing things like outside, it's making sure I take walks, go hike when we can. It's been different with a 6-month-old at home, so I'm still figuring out how to take care of myself and a child. But I know that there are many great people who have gone before me who have done it, so I know I'll figure it out too.
Well, speaking of great people, you're one of them. You're a entrepreneur. Excuse me. See, I still can't get it right. What advice would you give to other moms who are considering starting their own business while also raising a family?
I think that there is, and this is not just to moms, but to anyone, I think there is a culture in the startup world that is gotten pretty toxic over the years, of this. You have to give your entire life to this one idea. And if you don't, and you're not willing to risk it all, then you don't care about your idea enough. And I've heard that a lot. I work full-time jobs and have fundraise, because I have wanted to make sure that I have money for childcare and for my kids to be happy and, to be able to provide for my family. Um, I think you can have something that you're passionate about and that you want to build and not have to just risk it all and work, all the time. I talk to founders every week who are burnt out, who are having anxiety attacks, who are stressed that they won't get investment if they don't look like they're giving their all. And I think that is really, it's a culture shift that's going to have to change within the startup space. I don't know if and when that will happen. But my advice would be, like, start as soon as you have your idea. Don't wait, because I feel like I waited too long to start Fundraise, but to also build in taking care of yourself while you're starting, because if you run at it for too long and too hard, you are not going to be able to, maybe your company will succeed, but you as a person are going to have a lot bigger struggles.
And looking ahead, what are your goals for both your family and your business? And how do you plan to continue balancing these priorities in the future?
Yeah, I mean, Funrage ideally will continue to grow. We want to get more people downloading the app and using it. It's a free app, so there's really no reason not to. You can give back fast. So we want to keep that growth going. So finding more ways to get in front of people who want to make an impact. Working on some plans that way, and then looking at how we're going to make the app better and continue to grow that going forward. And then for the family, it's to make sure that we're all kind of staying on that uneven balance as much as we can. So my husband can focus on his job, I can focus on what I'm doing, and our son feels loved and taken care of as we work on building him. I think that he will grow up seeing two working parents who support each other, and that is a goal of mine.
And you mentioned it's a free app. Where can people find you again?
Fundrage.com or at Fundrage on Instagram are the best places to find us.
And Maria, we have just a few minutes left, and guests always get the final word. I usually ask guests to share advice to help our audience become less stressed, more resilient, and more empowered. But I read a quote of yours that really left an impression on me. You said, quote, "Making big change isn't hard when everyone's doing something small." Would you take us into the close day on that?
Yeah, I think that we feel like we our $5 isn't going to make a difference, so why even do it? It's that, it's that old parable that, like, about the starfish that you throw into the ocean. And it was like it mattered to that one starfish. And I don't know when I heard that in my life, but, like, you doing something is going to matter to someone. And even if you can't write the $500 check to a nonprofit, a small amount of money that you do and that 10 other people do then starts to add up. And I think we get overwhelmed and lost in the vastness or the bigness of problems. But if everyone does that, then there's no step forward. So Fundraise is designed out of this spirit of like, if we all just chip in a little bit, we're going to make a bigger impact overall.
You just said there's no step forward, and this show is called Next Steps Forward. So that's a great plug. I appreciate that.
Of course.
Marie Underwood, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And thank you to our audience, which now includes people in over 50 countries, for joining us for another episode of Next Steps Forward. I'm Chris Meek. For more details on upcoming shows and guests, please follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/Chris Meek Public Figure and on X at Chris Meek_USA. We'll be back next Tuesday, same time, same place, with another leader from the world of business, politics, public policy, sports, or entertainment. Until then, stay safe and keep taking your next steps forward.